GM. Today is February 13th, and we are joined by the LlamaRisk team as well as members of CVX5 with a amazing research presentation. Wormhole. Actually, wait, quickly, everyone, see that link in the upper left? That is our sponsors at Protocol FX, so they make this stream possible. Give them a scan and see what they're up to. Wormhole.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Garrett. It's always a pleasure to be on Leviathan, and today we're joined with the CVX5 team. At least right now, we've got 2 of the CVX5, and hopefully shortly we'll be joined by number 3. So for today, we're going to be talking about the upcoming launch of Resupply, which is going to be the first sub-DAO for Convex Finance. This is something that I'm personally really looking forward to, and I know that the guys here joined with us today are also really excited about this. So definitely interested to hear all of their thoughts. In particular, what we're going to try to cover in this discussion is to get into the nitty-gritty of what's the straight up situation when you want to get involved with Resupply, either as a borrower, a user of the protocol, or if you want to be a stakeholder of the protocol. What are you getting yourself into? So what are the risks involved with the protocol mechanics, and what's the potential upside for being a part of the Resupply ecosystem? So those are the things that we're really interested in. We want to get right to the point about what the mechanics are and what the reality of this protocol is. So the other half of this conversation is going to be covering some work that LlamaRisk has done. So we're joined on the LlamaRisk side with XM3Van, who I'll refer to as Thomas for simplicity. He's done a lot of research on the LlamaLend interest rate model, and the performance, as we'll discuss later on, of the LlamaLend markets, the underlying markets of Resupply, have a big impact on the performance and the proper operation of Resupply as a protocol. So we'll go into those underlying dependencies with explanation of some of our underlying research there. So let's go ahead and get started. We can go around and have you guys introduce yourselves. I know that you have been on Leviathan at least a couple of times already, so most people are already familiar with you, and I'm sure you already have your introduction pitch memorized. But for just to indulge us further, if you could please let's go around and just do a quick introduction of everybody.
Sure. I could start. I mean, it's pretty simple. I started off in 2014 in crypto, started off as a Bitcoin maxi. In 2020, around DeFi summer, I kind of saw the light with Ethereum, wanted to earn yield, and converted a lot of my Bitcoin at that point. Got involved with some of the craziness surrounding the Ohm forks, and that led me into the Curve rabbit hole. And I also obviously discovered Convex, Frax, and that's how I got here. So, been a Curve maxi and a Convex maxi ever since. Deeply entrenched in the community, and I just feel that Curve is part of the future as far as stablecoins goes, and that's my pitch. I don't know if anybody, Boz, if you want to take it over, or Ranger, if you want to do.
Cool. Yeah. Boz here. Been in Surf for 17 years. Been in crypto full time since 2017. Was the CEO of a Koch network. Helped bring it online. I'm the co-founder of 4 Moons, which is a DeFi advisory firm. Big Curve ecosystem supporter, especially with Convex. And yeah, super excited to be here and talk all things Resupply.
Yeah, I'm Green Ranger. I'm the newest member of the now CVX6, and my background's a little different. I've been in crypto since 2017, but my 9 to 5's in medical device manufacturing, and found this world because back in the day, it seems so long ago, interest rates were basically zero, and we sit on a lot of working capital, and I wanted to figure out how do I make that working capital work. and crypto had yields that I couldn't find anywhere else. And Curve was doing such a great job with stable coins. I said, let's figure it out if we can create our own little bank to grow our manufacturing company. And that led me into Convex. And the journey's been amazing, actually. And I have to give credit to Garrett and a Llama party that happened last spring, where I think it was Boz, Jason, and Investor were on, and they said, if you have a bag of Convex, we'd love to talk to you and join our TG. And that's how I met these guys. So the origin story actually of my journey with them started on one of these streams. So thank you for hosting that last year. But excited to chat with all of you today.
Same here.
Great. So glad to have you guys on and have this chat. It sounds like we're all definitely Curve Maxis here, and it seems what has unified all of you folks together is your common involvement with Convex ecosystem, and I think also Frax ecosystem. So just, maybe you could, one of you guys could give us a little bit further context on how CVX5 came to be and what specifically is the mission of CVX5, or rather 6 now CVX6.
Yeah, I mean, it started very informal about 18 months ago, 2 years ago. We just started a Telegram group, started getting people that were, Convex Maxis. We realized that there was a need for, voting support. We were in the depths of a bear market. There was a lot of, fragmentation when it came to voting and that sort of thing. And so we wanted to have like a community where we could, talk to people about, upcoming votes, upcoming proposals. And then it kind of evolved into, well, there's people out there that don't really know how Curve works, or they're having trouble setting up pools, or they really don't understand how incentives work or incentivization. Then we started meeting people like, the guys, at Trident and major stablecoin providers that, wanted to participate and just didn't really have a way. They didn't have anyone to really talk to. So we started filling that void. And that's sort of what we've been doing ever since. And so we have regular calls almost on a weekly basis with a lot of Curve related protocols, and people that want to get involved and want to create pools, and we help them along the way. And then since we're big parts of the community, we can do that. We want to see Curve grow.
Excellent. Cool. So how about Thomas, would you give us a brief introduction of yourself and the work that you're going to be sharing a little bit later in this conversation?
Sure. My name is Thomas. I'm a research analyst in LlamaRisk. I've been with them for like 2 years nearly, or 1-2 years. And I've been around in the ecosystem for a while. I also joined, I think, Core 2017, been doing a bunch of stuff and a bunch of different projects, and eventually ended up in LlamaRisk and enjoying my time there. And with what I'm going to present, it's effectively on interest rate models. This is kind of the research topic that I've ingrained myself in, and specifically we're focusing on the LlamaLand markets.
All right, excellent. So let's get right into it. I think a good place to start with our conversation of what is Resupply, what value proposition does it have, and everything about it. Let's just start by talking about how it came to be. It had an interesting it's an interesting place in Convex's whole ecosystem because it's described as a sub-DAO, and this is a new concept, I think, that Convex hasn't really addressed before, or developed a sub protocol that is related to Convex in some way. So maybe could you guys start us off by talking about how Resupply fits in with Convex and how that whole came to be?
Yeah, sure. my understanding is that you mentioned it. Resupply is a sub DAO. That's relatively new for Convex. They're more known for their wrappers, but they're moving away from that model and focusing more on the sub DAO model from this point forward. So I should also mention that Resupply, it was developed in collaboration with Yearn. So I should give a shout out there to Wavy and a couple of the other developers there. So this is a collaborative effort. But yeah, you're right. It is a sub DAO. They are moving away from their traditional model, which is to focus on wrappers. And I think that I don't want to say it came from the Prisma hack or the Prisma, but obviously I think that had some influence on their direction. I should mention that it's not related to Prisma. None of the code is related to Prisma. None of the code is related to Liquidity. It's actually a FraxLend fork. So
yeah, that's what's really interesting about how Resupply came to be, is that it was not an evolution from Prisma, because like you say, it's totally separate,
right.
But yet there's an intrinsic link between them somehow, because of this token allocation that's being given to Prisma. There's an effort to make Prisma users whole who were affected in this hack that happened.
Yeah, I think you said it. I think that was really the main focus, was to try and bring the Prisma community into the Resupply fold. And to do it in a way where, it makes them whole over the long term. And, even though they're not necessarily related, and airdrop wasn't certainly wasn't necessary per se, but they, the Convex developers wanted to show goodwill, and wanted to enhance the community, and wanted to offer that to the Prisma holders and to the victims of the hack. So yeah, indirectly, I think that it is related to some degree, but not from a code or mechanisms perspective. So but I think what they did was they probably saw that Prisma had a concept using a CDP design, but they innovated on it, and they made it into something completely different, where they're not using volatile assets like Ethereum or whatever. They're focusing on stable assets, lending vault tokens, which is completely new. We haven't seen this before in a CDP model. And so that's what Resupply primarily focuses on.
Yeah, so going back a little bit, what you were saying earlier about this this protocol being a collaborative effort between Convex and Yearn. So as I understand it, the two lead developers working on Resupply are C2TP and Wavy. And C2TP, of course, is the founder of Convex. Wavy, he's deeply involved with the Yearn ecosystem. I don't know exactly what his official title might be, but he's like an extremely good developer. So.
He's a developer at Yearn for sure. And then Dudsehen, which is another developer at Yearn as well.
Yeah, so these people, I've worked with them for a number of years, and this is what makes me the most excited about Resupply. Even before I really looked into how the protocol mechanics worked, I just knew that these people were involved with the protocol development, and these are two, in my opinion, of like the strongest developer presence that you can have on a Curve ecosystem project. So right. I'm without having seen the audit reports, because we don't have access to those yet, or seeing the code. The protocol hasn't been deployed yet. Just knowing the people that are involved with this project, it's the heavy hitters of the Curve ecosystem that makes me pretty confident that it's going to go in the right direction. These are people who take security seriously, who are concerned about protecting users. Yeah. So I'm very confident in the people working on this, and Also, just want to emphasize what you were saying, that this is a joint sub-DAO between Convex and Yearn. So just maybe can we talk a little bit more about what that means? As I understand it, there's a token allocation that is directed towards both of those protocols.
Yeah. Yeah, as far as the tokenomics, there's, I believe it's 20% that's going to the Convex protocol, and then there's 10% that's going to Yearn. So there's that token allocation. And then obviously there's, from what I understand, obviously the collaboration. There's a lot of mutual development going on behind the scenes. So I think they've, they've grown closer together, and I think they've, joined forces was probably not the right word, but they probably are working closely together to see this protocol being developed and launched. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting chain of events. But like you said, I think we've got some of the brightest developers. You're already preaching to the choir here, so we all are very, very fond of the work that they do. And we think that they take security super seriously. They understand the peg mechanisms really well. They understand incentivization. They certainly understand curve, and they understand how to set the parameters correctly for the curve pools. So yeah, I think we're dealing with something that is very unique. From my perspective, at least. I don't know, Boz or Ranger, if you guys want to step in. I don't want to. If you have anything
I
else
think
to
it's
add.
just to highlight too. I mean, I think that the tokenomics are very fair, and to take care of the Prisma group. I mean, let's not understate how cool that is, how beneficial that is to the community. There's a lot of negative things that could have happened, and I think hat tip to C2, Winnie, Wavy, everyone else involved to take care of those individuals in the bear market as well, where a lot of these things can, people just brush them away and move on to the next project. I think it's a beautiful foundation to start this new sub-DAO on.
Cool. So kind of how I wanted the rest of this conversation to go, before we get into the real nitty gritty about what Resupply is in terms of all of the mechanics that are involved with it, I want to talk more about the dependencies that it has, which is the underlying markets that it uses as collateral, which are the Curve Lend or LlamaLend markets and Frax Lend markets. Just maybe before we get into all of that, let's just give a general overview of what the whole resupply system looks like, and so we can take a mental note of how all the pieces generally kind of fit together, and then we can switch over to diving more deeply into the LlamaLand side of things.
Sure.
So I've got.
Would it be helpful to share the image of the flow at this point?
Yes.
I can pull that up.
Yeah, so I'm actually sharing my screen. So if you just
Okay,
show
perfect.
that,
There you go.
then you guys you can just give us a high level overview of what happens within the resupply system.
Well, at its core, like we mentioned in the beginning, it's a FraxLend fork, so that should be said right off the bat. But at its core, it's based on the CDP model. But the difference here, or the unique attributes here, is that it allows you to deposit the lending vault tokens that come from the lending markets, whether it be LlamaLand or FraxLend. So when you deposit, CRV USD and LlamaLand, you're issued this lending vault token. And so mostly that token just sits idly and doesn't do anything. What they did here with Resupply is they allowed it so that you can take that lending vault token, deposit it, and borrow ReUSD, which is their stablecoin, the new stablecoin that they're issuing. And the key thing there is that, or the innovation there is that the interest rates that they're charging is always going to be half of the lending rate, or half of the risk-free rate, or 2%, whichever is greater. So there's always this situation where you're going to be, I don't want to say always, that might not be accurate, but there's for the most part in healthy lending market, there should be a situation where there's this arbitrage where you are always in a favorable environment, and you have low borrow fees for USD.
That's one of the interesting features that
Right.
I found with Resupply is the way that it sets the interest rate. The borrow rate is always half of what you're
Correct.
earning on it at the very most.
Correct, and that's algorithmically set that way. And so, so essentially, if you wanted to look like at a bird's eye view, if you're earning 10%, or if the lending rate on CRV USD or whatever market it happens to be on LlamaLend is at 10%, that supply rate, you're going to be charged theoretically, at Resupply 5%. And so your collateral or your underlying is always earning fees. And so that's truly unique. And it's also a stable asset. So you're not dealing with volatile asset. You're not dealing with the fluctuations that you would normally deal with, like with Ethereum or other assets. And so it minimizes liquidation risks too. It's not to say that there aren't any liquidation risks. There certainly are. But because you're dealing with already a pegged asset, it's much different, and it's truly unique and very, very favorable for stable coin farming.
Right. So the basic feature that's I guess the core component of the protocol is this marketplace where you have a CDP and it is using as collateral the supply side of a lend market, either in LlamaLend or Frax lend. And you can as using CurveUSD as an example, you would deposit CurveUSD supply to a target market that is whitelisted on Resupply,
Right.
and then you would be able to mint ReUSD from that, either to leverage it, your exposure to the supply side lend market, or you can use it for a couple of other purposes that we will talk about a little bit later. But the gist of it is that Resupply DAO has to decide which LlamaLend markets or Frax lend markets we're willing to be exposed to, and then it's going to have to manage and monitor the performance of the market, because that has serious implications for the peg of ReUSD and stability of the Resupply protocol.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. Like, I think the idea here is that the devs don't want to obviously choose any markets that would be problematic. They obviously want to focus on the top collaterals in the space, wrap stake ETH, or WETH, I should say, and WBTC, TBTC, things like that. So the focus is going to be obviously on these types of collaterals, not on governance tokens or anything that could potentially, wreck the lending market. If that makes sense.
Yeah, so I think it's probably pretty apparent to anybody listening right now about what the use case or the value proposition of Resupply is, but maybe could we just hit that right on the head about what is Resupply trying to achieve? What would we consider like the success outcome of Resupply doing what it's setting out to do?
Well, I think, there's a lot of different use cases, and there's certainly a lot of different angles that this can go in. But let's start with like basic premise, right? You'd have, if you have CRV USD, the idea is that you would be able to borrow against your stable coins, and earn yield while you're borrowing these stable coins. So in a very, very basic use case, you could deposit CRV USD into the lending market or into Resupply. You would borrow ReUSD, and you could do anything you'd like with that, right? You could seek out other strategies on DeFi. You could swap it into the USDC, do whatever you need to do, pay for any simple expenses, things like that. or you could deposit the ReUSD into several strategies. Obviously there's going to be some LPs that are going to be set up. I know that there's going to be an SCRV USD ReUSD LP. There's going to be one for Frax ReUSD as well. So you'll for I should say SFrax ReUSD, which again, you're going to be able to deposit the ReUSD into the LPs or into the insurance pool and earn additional RSUP tokens. So you could see a situation where you would borrow the ReUSD, earn the RSUP tokens while you're borrowing, right? Collateral is still earning yield underlying, and then you could deposit into the insurance pool and earn an additional more RSUP tokens and ReUSD there. Or you could deposit into the curve pool, and because you're dealing with a situation like staked Frax, that underlying that collateral is always moving up in value. So the base APY of the curve pool is always going to be very, very high. So same thing with theoretically same situation with SCRV USD, right? As more fees get generated for curve and are deposited into going to SCRV USD, that market should also be very favorable as well. And that LP should also be very, very lucrative, another very lucrative strategy, I should say. And then, of course, there's the more degen side of things, right? You could go a step further and leverage, and there's going to be a built-in leverage mechanism in the Resupply protocol. So you're going to be able to say,
And I read that the leverage is going to be pretty high, like max 20x leverage, something like that.
That's correct.
Correct. And so, you could target a certain market that you're interested in, deposit your CRV USD, set a certain parameter, I don't know how they're going to set it because I don't know what the interface is going to look like, but I assume set a certain LTV, and then it will basically loop, take your ReUSD, put it back into the same lending market and keep doing it over and over again. Now, there are things with that. There are things that need to be kind of mentioned about that, because the more looping that happens, there's positives and negatives, right? So the more looping that happens, that will trigger redemptions. And also the more looping that happens, it will also...
So it'll trigger redemptions if the ReUSD stable coin starts going under peg.
Right.
Which there's a redemption mechanism that's similar to how Liquidity works, where anybody can redeem against the collateral. But there's different features with this that I want to get into in more detail a little bit later, because we're already getting into the nitty gritty.
Well, maybe I jumped in there, but the bottom line is you have various tiers of sophistication there, right? You can just deposit your CRV USD. You can take out your loan as ReUSD and use it in other strategies in DeFi. You could deposit it into the insurance pool, earn additional ReUSD or RSUP tokens. You could deposit it into one of the other LPs on Curve as well. So those are the kind of the three, and then obviously leverage is sort of the third layer, and that gets a little bit more complicated.
Yeah, so I think that Resupply in general is a protocol that it's pretty easy to conceptualize what the main point is, because it's a pretty standard looking CDP kind of borrowing product. But then there's all these onion layers that you can peel about all the little dynamics that are involved. And you mentioned some mechanics like the insurance pool. That is a really important component of the whole system that we should definitely dive into more a little bit later in the discussion.
Can we touch on a few things here? I think the initial question is, what happens if Resupply is successful, and what are the ripple effects and just general macro impacts across the markets for this? So one of the key points here and the missions behind this is that Curve USD and FX USD the supply increases considerably, especially given the looping
Mhm.
mechanisms around resupply. I mean, if you think about it, $1 million position can become a $10 million position easily, up to 20 million, right? Depending on like how degenerative the users are. But let's just talk about like Curve USD and Frax USD and the expansion of the supply dynamics as it relates to just market share of these stable coins. First, you have a supply increase considerably because of resupply, especially because of this looping mechanism. As it relates to like Curve USD, the more supply, just given the dynamics of how it's structured, is that it brings the borrowing rates considerably down. So what happens to the lending markets at scale when it comes to these things? Well, one, more fees get generated as Curve USD, for example, gets minted, and it's going to be a considerable amount of fees. Those fees will drive the demand for Curve increases given the fee generation, because now there's more fees being generated back to Curve, which motivates more users to stake Curve on top of Convex to earn those fees, which means more Curve goes into Convex, right?
Mhm.
Which brings up the
Describing the
value of
flywheel.
Curve. It locks into the
Yep.
ecosystem, and everybody understands the dynamics, because that's why, I mean, Convex is already successful in just generating that, but this is going to increase it considerably, because now there's going to be a supply sink for Curve USD, bringing down the borrowing fees, which increases the fee generation back to Curve. So now we see more fee generation given demand, which increases theoretically the value of Curve, right? More value of Curve actually has secondary impacts, because it impacts the voting markets, which further incentivizes protocols to pursue to drive other revenue, or to like incentivize those markets. So this lending protocol, this stable protocol that Resupply is being positioned at, is so complementary to the overall like
Mhm.
the holistic view of Curve, because it drives fees to the value of Curve, which increases staking, which motivates users to drive down the borrowing rates, which increases the attractiveness of people wanting to place their stable coins here. When you have something that is ultra competitive with borrow rates across any lending protocol, whether it's Aave, Morpho, on any chain, where does the value proposition come to do something like this, if it's not resupply? So from our perspective, it's, you know, these initiatives by Resupply can drive the value of Curve USD and Frax USD into a top 10 stablecoin.
Yeah.
And that is the generative, like that is the impact that Resupply can have or will have, assuming everything goes well. But overall, I think from a product positioning standpoint, they've really uncovered a tremendous opportunity to make these lending markets the most competitive in the space, which positively impacts the fee generation aspect to the respective protocols, and allows people to park their stable coins here relatively safely, rather than like other lending protocols that aren't being positioned as such. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and just a quick comment too, like the timing of this is beautiful with everything that's happening around the stablecoin narrative in the US. So I think the ultimate goal here, just to like simply state it, is the proliferation of CRV USD and Frax USD to billions of dollars in market cap. And that's what we want to see. And this is a turbocharger to making that happen. And I think what it allows, like for me in my use case, like what level of risk do I want to take on? And this ability to have, and we don't know what the user experience looks like, but one can imagine like it's going to be a simple slider of some sort, or like I want more leverage because I'm confident in this market, I want less leverage. That's really unique. I think that's really unique. So I know we want to get in the weeds, but I just want to get bullish for a second, because I think we're on the cusp of this tidal wave of stable coins. The stable coin season, I think, is among us, and this is going to be a big piece of that puzzle. So I'm excited.
So supply sync for CurveUSD is a big theme of scaling the stablecoin, and Resupply, in its mission to contribute to that supply sync, it's also working in conjunction with other products that are working in a similar purpose. For example, if viewers had watched the stream that we did a few weeks back, we were joined with Alberto from Swiss Stake, and we were talking about S-Curve USD, which he had helped in the development of that product, which is simply staking Curve USD to earn a portion of the revenue that the Curve USD protocol is generating. And since that was implemented back in November, borrow rates to mint Curve USD have declined precipitously. So from around an average of 25% APR to down to around 6%. So it's been a substantial decrease in what it costs to borrow or to mint Curve USD. But at the same time, we have not seen yet a substantial supply expansion from that product on its own. So what I'm looking forward to is to see what impact is Resupply going to make when that comes to market. And that has its own dynamic to be able to substantially increase your leverage of supply to the LlamaLend markets, and drive down rates and really get the ecosystem kickstarted for the next phase of LlamaLend's growth trajectory. Because presumably when you start adding substantial amount of supply to those LlamaLend markets, of course, FraxLend as well, but we're right. For the purpose of this conversation and for the purpose of what I'm personally involved in, LlamaLend is what we spend a lot of time thinking about. So that's why I'm talking LlamaLend here. Mm-hmm. But presumably that should drive a lot of growth of those lending markets, and we should see ideally more borrowers stepping in to use the protocol and get the whole Curve ecosystem really pumping. That's the goal. So
the goal. That's the goal. Said it. We want that.
So let's move on to the other part of this conversation a little bit. I want to bring Thomas in here. Now that we kind of have some understanding of how Resupply interacts with these underlying lending markets, we need to understand what's the nature of these lending markets and what is Resupply potentially exposed to. Because if for some reason the market that is used to mint ReUSD becomes insolvent, it's illiquid, there's potential for users who open leverage positions to be stuck in those positions. They can potentially be subject to liquidation if the underlying market suffers from insolvency and has to be liquidated. So there's potentially bad repercussions of a misperforming LlamaLend market. And what you've been doing research on specifically has been to do with the interest rate model that the LlamaLend markets use, and the assurance that that interest rate model creates in making sure that there's always ample liquidity in the market. And the other half of that coin is that the market is operating to the best of its capability, that there's the most optimal match between supply side yield and most competitive borrow rate. So maybe you can take it from here and tell us about what is the interest rate model that LlamaLend markets use. And there's some inconsistency in that. So maybe you can go over those inconsistencies with us. And yeah, just tell us about what problem that you've been observing and how you're trying to solve it.
Sure. So we actually prepared a slide deck for this. So I'm just going to pull this up. 1 second. And yeah, the slide deck is really necessary because a lot of things have been happening. And I think this is the only way really to communicate this effectively, maybe a little bit unusual for a stream. But effectively, I will go over these. This is the outline, the rough outline, the introduction of just LlamaLand markets and policies, the motivation why we were doing this research, then how we're solving the problem, the results, and then kind of impact and future outlook. So let's get right into it. So first of all, in general, in DeFi, most lending markets use utilization or set the interest rate policy on utilization. This is also true for LlamaLand markets. So utilization is given of the lending market is given by the debt divided by the total assets. So utilization increases if borrowers take on debt or suppliers withdraw assets, and inversely, if it decreases if debt is repaid or assets are added. So there's currently two different policies. So this on the one side, this is the most dominant one, is the semi-log MP. And don't get scared by the equations; it will make more sense. But the rate is determined by the min rate divided by the ratio of the rate max divided by rate min to the power of utilization. What I really want you to take away from the slide is that the rate min is what happens at zero utilization, and the rate max is kind of the rate that is at 100% utilization. And for the secondary MP, you effectively have a little bit of a more complex equation. You have the parameters, which is the target utilization, then a rate multiplier. So if you look at the equation on the top here, you see that the rate is determined by referencing a different market. So typically in CRV-USD, these are the mint markets, and we're talking about collateral assets that also are collateral in mint markets. And the rate multiplier is effectively what you use, multiply the rate with at zero utilization. So this is the alphabet parameter, and then the beta parameter is the rate multiplier at 100% utilization. And
so secondary monetary policy is a bit complex to conceptualize, but maybe I'll try a stab at breaking it down even further. That there is a target utilization that the market is striving for, and that is typically it's parameterized at 80% utilization. If the market is utilized above that, it's going to increase the rates. At the target utilization, it's going to be referencing the Curve USD mint market of that asset. So if it's a WETH LlamaLand market, it's referencing the Curve USD WETH mint market to determine what its rate is. And if the utilization goes above that, then it applies a multiplier to substantially increase the borrow rate. And if it's below that, then so basically the lend market is following what it costs to mint Curve USD from its respective Curve USD mint market.
So high utilization is always going to have much higher rates, and it's just going to follow the utilization of those markets, right?
Yeah, ideally. And the problem is, and I think Thomas is going to go into this soon, is that we've observed that secondary monetary policy, at least the way that the markets have been parameterized, have not been able to adequately adapt to all market conditions. So maybe, Thomas, is that something that you could cover?
I do, of course. So just a visual representation, but it has already been explained. This is a semi-log, and let's just jump right into the problem. So a quick setup. So we had a recent market downturn. In general, the price of CRV-USD was relatively high, and the depth fraction was below. So just check the date here. It's around the 31st, and you can see that this matches up, which just meant that the rates in mint markets were quite low. And now zooming back into the lending market, in particular the WETH long market on mainnet, we see that that here in this chart that the utilization of the lending market reached close to 100%. And you see with the orange line that the mint market rate was relatively low, and even with the multiplier, the rate on the lending market was quite affordable. at 11%. And what that effectively meant is that suppliers in that market were unable to withdraw their funds because borrowers were not incentivized to repay, which just shows, okay, we have an issue here. Lenders are trapped. And what the consequence of this was that effectively there was a reversion back to the semi-log MP, which is easier to parameterize and understand because you don't have this codependency to a mint market. So these problems of underutilization and overutilization are not just isolated to the secondary MP. So historically, LlamaLand markets have often been underutilized. So this is an example of the half ETH market. So as Wormhole was mentioning, generally this the goal is to have around 80% utilization. And in this chart, you see this is not the case. And also there's examples, for instance, the TBTC market on Arbitrum, where it reached 100% utilization. You may wonder what happened on January the 1st. There was actually a rate change of the parameters of the market. You can also see how the rate then declines. But in this stage where we're at 100% utilization, again, suppliers were trapped just in the as in the example.
And just going back to the topic of resupply on this has implications for resupply users. If you're leveraging on this particular LlamaLand market and utilization hits 100%, you're not going to be able to unwind your position until you have sufficient liquidity back in the market. So for our part, as risk providers for Curve, we are looking to do whatever we can to make sure that these markets are operating in a safe way, that that people who are using resupply, for example, will always be able to withdraw their capital when they want to.
So that they can unwind the position.
We want them to be able to unwind the position at all times. And
Right.
if there are delays, that those delays should be transitory, and they can withdraw in multiple stages rather than being trapped for
Right.
potentially days or weeks in an illiquid market.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah, and just to, these weren't the only examples, but what we kind of took away from observing these different issues, that first of all, there's a need to identify the right utilization levels that balances this capital efficiency versus lender safety. And a need for setting the parameters of these interest rate models to correctly, so that they effectively manage around this target utilization, and also the need to test different policies to understand kind of the market dynamics and the impact that this interest rate model has. So this brings us to the methodology. So what did we try to do? So we tried to look at identifying optimal utilization. We took a very supplier-centric view, and we just historically looked at what happens in volatile periods and how much do suppliers of the total assets supplied withdraw. And we take this quantile-based approach here, and we select in the current methodology the 10th percentile and try to subtract that from the utilization. What that effectively means is that we have this buffer spare. So we subtract from 100% utilization. So we always have this buffer spare, and this is how we define target the optimal utilization.
And so that 10th percentile means that in 90% of cases where suppliers are withdrawing during volatile periods, 90% of the time the withdrawal size is less than that amount, right? That percentage amount.
Exactly.
So less than 16% in this case.
Exactly. So moving on to kind of how do we identify optimal parameters, and I try to keep this really high level, but we generally try to identify relatively stable periods try to take statistical properties from this, such as the sensitivity to the rate, and then we try or we build use a stochastic equation that models utilization, taking this rate as feedback and having an element of random fluctuations. So just what you see here is the actual utilization paths and simulated utilization paths with the default configuration. You can see the map fairly well. And what that allows us to do is we can compare now how different interest rate models function and how different parameters work. So how do we do this? We effectively say, okay, the semi-log model has X parameters, the semi-log model has another set of parameters, this linear piecewise function has another set of parameters, and we run these simulations over multiple paths and then look at the distribution of these evaluation metrics. Obviously, we don't.
And these distribution charts that you show here, these are really important to understand what are the characteristics that we observe from the existing market, which is shown in gray on this chart, versus your optimized simulated market, which is the optimized semi-log. And then piecewise linear, you can kind of ignore that one because that's just looking at an alternative interest rate model that we might implement and what the characteristics of that interest rate model would be, just to demonstrate that we can apply this methodology to exploring different alternative interest rate models that might improve upon what semi-log can do.
Exactly. So just to quickly go over the metrics and what they mean. So the mean standard error is just looking at how far and what is the observed utilization and how far is that away from the target utilization. So the time above threshold is how often with a given buffer is the utilization above the target utilization. And the volatility of the utilization, volatility of the rate is self-explanatory. It's a volatility measure. So what did we in the end observe? So first of all, for the CRV long market, just to set again the context, it has historically, or for the time period that we selected, been underutilized. So we see that the underutilization is not great, so it's a minor deviation.
It's been utilized on average 59% over the observed time period versus what our target utilization is according to your methodology, which is 65%. That's what we're striving for.
Exactly, it's a quite suppliers like to withdraw a lot from this market in volatile times, it seems. So looking at the different metrics, what we see is that the optimized semilog and I'm just going to ignore the piecewise linear, but the optimized semilog has, compared to the default configuration, has a better MSE, so it manages to track the rate more effectively. The days above threshold are much lower, and the rate, which I think is the most interesting here, is higher. So you have on the one side this fundamental trade-off between tracking the target utilization better, but it comes at the cost of more volatile rates because that's how it is managed. So looking at
that's really key here, and in my opinion, containing the time above threshold and getting that value for the MSE as low as possible is really great. But at what cost? If you're increasing the rate volatility too much, then you could suffer a risk that market participants are more likely to manipulate the markets, the market rate. So you could have a downside effect of allowing for too high of rate volatility in the market. So you have to find some compromise between those.
Exactly. And just to give you an example, how the models compare. So in orange, you see the default configuration, and you see this is capped, by the way, to 80% because it has quite a rapid increase. But you see that in general, the default, the optimized configuration offers a lower rate before again, encouraging cheaper borrowing, which hopefully, just having the small microeconomic perspective, hopefully increases the more borrowers in the market. So again, PAF ETH market, very similar situation, just the underutilization is a bit more drastic. So in this market, we have an optimal utilization of 84%, and the observed is 52. Again, the rate, the trade-off is again very visible. You see that the optimized semilog manages to track the MSE way better. This has in part to do that the default rates are set quite low, like the max rate is quite low compared to the values. And then you see that the volatility again is much higher. And again, if we're looking at this comparison, the deviation between the orange line and the green line is much more significant. Again, same rationale, trying to encourage with cheaper rates, more utilization.
So hey, Thomas, let's call it right there for the examples, and just the main point here with these results that we've run for a few of these target markets. We've put up a DAO vote recently to adjust the interest rate models for these target markets that we've done optimizations for, which in general is increasing the max rate of those markets. So it's improving the assurance that those markets won't be fully utilized. If they do, then borrowers will be incentivized to repay, or lenders will be incentivized to step in and bring that utilization down. And in general, those markets should perform with these better performance metrics that Thomas has shared here. So that's what we're doing right now for these markets. We plan to continue to do these optimizations for other LlamaLend markets. And then there's some additional R&D that's coming in the future. And maybe, Thomas, you want to tell us a little bit about what are kind of the next steps of this research project of the LlamaLand interest rate models.
Yeah, of course. I'm jumping to this. So basically, what has been what we have been discussing with the curve folks is effectively trying out different models. So some that were mentioned that we have like really brief tests on were iteration of the semilog with a quadratic model and a cubic model. And just to show really quick results, here you can see that again, we see this trade-off. They tend to be more volatile, but again, managed rate a little bit better. And it again comes down to the trade-off, how much do you want to go into this direction. Apart from that, we planning to roll out more markets, as Worm was mentioning. So the secondary monetary policy markets that we have that recently were reversed, that I showed in the beginning, we will be optimizing parameters for those, and then also for the S dollar market. There's something's coming up there, and I think this is really most of the things I wanted to share. I'm happy to dive into some topics more if there's interest, but I also know that this conversation is shared with Resupply, so happy to give back the mic.
Yeah, so this research that you're doing on monetary policy, this is one component of the LlamaLand markets that is very important to ensuring the proper operation of the market. There's other things that need to be considered as well, such as the max LTV that's allowable in the market. Is it parameterized appropriately to be able to withstand some kind of market shock events? The size of the market, is the exposure to the underlying collateral contained enough to be able to facilitate liquidations in all expected scenarios? So there's a number of factors that need to be considered when Resupply DAO is looking to onboard additional LlamaLand markets and consider whether or not they are safe enough to be suitable for onboarding. And that's really the main point of what we want to demonstrate with all these things that Thomas has been explaining today.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like choosing these markets is going to be very critical, and having the right markets is very important to maintain the
And thank you.
sustainability of the protocol.
Well, thank you for doing the hard work in the trenches there of analyzing what's optimal. I mean, just as an end user, I really appreciate that.
Thanks. I mean, for me, it's very exciting to work on it. I really enjoy what I'm doing.
I mean, a lot of that is over our heads, but honestly, it's just really impressive. It's nice to see that this level of detail is being is being conducted, and especially being provided to the Resupply DAO, because obviously we want it to be successful. So very, very impressive, actually.
Yeah, it is. I think to see this in a decentralized governance model is really impressive. This is heavy lifting in terms of that analysis. So again, thank you. And I know that I will be actively diving into the details. I'm very curious to learn more. So thank you for sharing the presentation today.
So let's get back into Resupply as the main focus of the conversation here. And there's some topics that I really would like to share with all the listeners today. Maybe a good place to start is we've talked about the general overview of how the CDPs work, and you can leverage. There's some use cases with the ReUSD stablecoin. Maybe a good place to get back into it is talking about how does the fee model work, and we can use that to talk a little bit more about the redemption mechanics.
Sure. Well, I mean, like I think what we previously stated, the way the fees are structured, it's basically is going to be it's done algorithmically, it's done automatically. It's going to be charging, or Resupply will be charging half of the supply or the lending rate, half of the risk-free rate, which is currently staked Frax, or 2%, whichever is greater. And the bulk of those fees will be going to Resupply stakers. Some of those fees will be going to the insurance pool as well. So that's primarily how the fees are going to be. And then, of course, we could talk a little bit about the insurance pool and about how liquidations, how that's covered, and redemptions as well.
Yeah, I would love to hear some more about the insurance pool. I think that's, I mentioned earlier in the call that I think that's a really critical component of the whole system. So yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, the insurance pool is basically, I think the inspiration was taken from, like the Liquidity's stability pool. You can take your ReUSD, you can deposit it into the pool. You could, as a depositor in the pool, you can earn ReUSD and RSUP emissions. Obviously, the pool is there to maintain the health of the protocol. So anything that's related to a CDP liquidation, the insurance pool would be absorbing that, as well as any bad debt or failed collateral, like if something like a lending market just went bad. Example, WBTC just went to zero or something like that. The insurance pool, in this scenario, should be a very relatively safe place to be, as long as you believe in the peg of CRVUSD and the collaterals that are being used in the lending markets are healthy. If we're dealing with relatively healthy collaterals, we should not have those types of collapses. So it should be a generally good place for people to stake overall in that pool.
And insurance pool providers are incentivized, like you mentioned, with a portion of the fees that are earned from borrowers, and they're also earning emissions for the ReSupp token emissions to further incentivize allocation there.
That's correct. And if you're confident in the types of collaterals that are on Resupply, then unless barring some really catastrophic event, it should be a relatively safe pool to be in. Nothing is 100%, and I'm not here to say that something bad can't happen, because we've certainly seen that before in DeFi. But if you look at what it's designed to do, which is to cover the liquidations and cover any potential bad debt. You're being paid pretty well with the RSUP emissions and with the a part of the protocol fees to be in that pool.
So I could imagine that with the insurance pool, users are going to be looking at what has Resupply actually onboarded, what markets has it onboarded, and how do I personally feel about the riskiness of those various markets. If I feel that my capital is safe because I trust the underlying CRV protocol well, and I trust the markets that have been onboarded, that those are collateral types that are reliable. I believe that those markets are configured in a good way that they're going to stay stable. Then I would probably be willing to deposit to the insurance pool for at a fairly low cost to Resupply, right? So the stakeholders of Resupply are really incentivized to make sure that they are managing the risk of the protocol overall, because that's gonna affect the cost that they have of attracting capital to the insurance pool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think
Correct.
that,
Yep.
I'm sorry, did you say something, Ranger?
No, I was just saying that's correct. I mean, 25% of the resup emissions is directed to that pool. And
Right.
the resup token itself is going to be the core thing that governs it. So you're right. It creates kind of like a self-protecting cycle there, flywheel, if you will, of sorts. So
Right, and stakeholders are going to want to, participate in governance to make sure that the collaterals that get added adhere to, really, really strict standards. One might even say that it might be a good idea to actually have RSUP tokens staked so you can participate in governance if you are in that pool, because you might want to have a say in the types of collateral that get added to Resupply. But yeah, that's the basic premise. So if you're comfortable enough with WETH and CRV USD and WBTC, then it should be a relatively okay place to be, unless unless a market got approved that shouldn't have been approved, and that would be the red herring there. And maybe we could talk a little bit about redemptions. I know we haven't really discussed that, but obviously the peg mechanism.
But before we get into redemptions, there was one juicy bit that I was hoping to see if you guys had an answer for. We're kind of dancing around what markets Resupply might onboard, but I think that there have been some mention floating around of specific markets that Resupply is looking to deploy at launch. I don't think anything's set in stone right now, but it sounds like there's some ideas. So do you have some general idea of what markets are going to be deployed or going to be offered right at deployment of the protocol?
Yeah, I mean, I think WETH is going to be deployed. WBTC market, $, possibly, TBTC. I think there might be a few more, but those are the bigger ones. But again, the idea behind this is to stick to the better collaterals in DeFi, the more pristine collateral.
Right. So these are more of the standard types of collaterals, WETH-based and BTC-based tokens, yield-bearing stable coins.
Yeah.
STUs,
yeah.
But
yield-bearing stable coins.
Specifically, governance tokens seem to be.
That's like a no-no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think you guys would agree with that too. I mean, obviously, that's probably a mistake. So I think the developers would stay away from that.
Well, I would definitely agree that what the ideas that are floating around seem to be the more conservative stance, which seems appropriate for the protocol deployment, in my opinion.
Right. Exactly. And so yeah, so that pool should be a relatively okay place to be. as far as as long as these collaterals are the ones that we stick to, it should be relatively safe.
And these decisions are ultimately made by a DAO, as I understand it. It sounds like right at deployment, there's going to be an on-chain DAO of RSUP token holders who can stake their RSUP and participate in governance. And those actions, like these ones we're mentioning of adding particular markets, there's also a slew of other responsibilities that governance has, but this is all going to be managed by an on-chain DAO.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yep.
100%. So staked RSUP tokens will have the governance power. Besides earning the fees, the borrow fees, they will also be able to participate in governance, and they will be able to have a say in the types of collateral that get added to the protocol, along with other things like parameters, and other fee changes, those sorts of things.
Excellent. So I think you were about to get into this topic of redemptions, which is definitely something that we need to cover today.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the redemptions is actually really interesting with Resupply, because normally redemptions are somewhat of a taboo word. People are usually afraid of when you hear the word redemption. But because we're dealing with stable collateral, the redemptions in Resupply's case, for the most part, actually turn out to be a net positive for the borrowers. When a redemption happens, there's a fee. There's a 1% fee. Half of that fee, 0.5%, goes to the protocol itself, and 0.5% goes to the actual CDPs, to the borrowers. So in essence, the borrowers are lowering their debt position with every redemption. So redemptions actually are net positive in most cases with Resupply. So that's a very unique redemption mechanism. Obviously, if our ReUSD falls off of peg, then that would trigger redemptions. If there's a lot of looping going on, that could trigger redemptions as well. And that's to be expected. Like we expect, or at least I know after talking to the developers, that redemptions are going to be normal and probably pretty commonplace, especially in the very beginning. But they are actually positive. They can be a positive because every time there's a redemption, it's actually benefiting the borrower.
Right, because it's reducing their loan to value. And there's the interesting kind of I guess the trade-off or the circumstantial benefit or detriment to the borrower due to redemptions is that I think if you are borrowing when Resup is or ReUSD is at peg, and you're leveraging up there, and then it dips below peg, and then redemptions happen, you end up earning a profit because there's a fee associated with that. Right. But if you were to lever up when ReUSD was below peg already, and you were redeemed against that, that would be disadvantageous to you. Is that?
I believe
do I
so,
kind of
yeah.
understand that?
Sounds
right?
about right. And yeah, I think you're right about that. I think that does make sense. Again, I'm not like an expert with that, but I think that is actually true.
And the gist of that whole thing is like, if ReUSD is trading above peg, that is good for the protocol, because
Yes.
then that means that borrowers can step in and
encourages
they can
more borrowing.
Yeah, exactly.
So in this case, ReUSD going above peg is technically seen as a positive. I know that's a little counterintuitive, but it just encourages more borrowing in the protocol itself.
So there's sort of a soft peg around $1 for our ReUSD. If it dips below $1, there's this 1% fee that's associated with redemptions. So there's the soft peg is kind of down to 1% under peg, and then it can float above peg, but then as you say, it's reinforced by this borrower incentivization to push it back down towards $1. So thereby it kind of keeps this range, but it's not necessarily a tight peg at 1-to-1 parity.
Yeah, it's not a tight peg, but just I was just talking to Winnie, and he was just saying that the UI will actually warn when something like that's actually about to happen. So there's going to be some safeguards there as well. But you're right, it's not a hard peg. It can drift upwards.
So really, at the end of the day, it's something that users who are coming to Resupply will want to monitor. That they'll want to check what is the REUSD peg, and as you say, there will be a warning on the UI about this, because whether or not you choose to open a position is probably the REUSD peg is going to play a role in your decision, in addition to some other things that because. Of course, like everything in Curve ecosystem and DeFi generally, there's a token emissions attached to borrower behaviors and to protocol interactions. And I know that there is a pretty intricate kind of tokenomic emissions strategy that Resupply uses with the RSUP token. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about how that works.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, one thing that's really interesting is that there's no supply cap, and that's a little bit different as far as RSUP goes. So it kind of ensures that there's always going to be emissions for the long term. So it'll go into for many years, but it is inflationary. So at TGE, it's 60% is going to be emitted. And over 5 years, those emissions drop. So it goes down to 12%, 10%, 8%. After the 5th year, the emissions are 2% per year. So that's a bit unique in the way that they structured that. And I think they did that to make sure or ensure that there's always going to be emissions to be able to pay the CDPs, the insurance pool, and to build liquidity for the different curve pools.
Cool. So I think one other topic we should cover, at least one other topic, is the liquidations. We've sort of gone over them in passing a little bit, but the fact of the matter is it is possible to get liquidated in Resupply, but it is not probable. Like you have stronger assurances against being liquidated in Resupply than you do in your typical CDP lending platform. So
right, because you're dealing with primarily stable assets. So generally speaking, if your collateral is earning yield from the lending market, from the underlying lending market, then you should be in a positive sum environment and not risk getting liquidated. But again, the nuance there is that if users go a little bit more on the degen side of things and they end up looping excessively, then and that could happen. Like you could see a situation where someone loops 20x and the lending market is now the curve lending market, the LlamaLend lending market is down to like a very, very single digit low rate, maybe even 0%. I know that sounds crazy, but something where it's super, super low. The underlying lending market is not providing the yield to the Resupply user, right? And so they're going to have to periodically top up their position in order to avoid that liquidation from happening. And so there could be a situation, I could see something like that happening if they're trying to farm Resup tokens and they don't really care about, what they're getting paid in the underlying lending market. So there's scenarios where that could happen, and a user would need to monitor the lending market to make sure that there's always that yield coming in.
And that sounds like a situation that would really only happen if the borrower was particularly negligent, because they would have to first off drive the borrow rate or they would have to drive the lending rate on the underlying LlamaLand market down to basically zero or very, very low.
And here's the flip side of that. Like, you would expect that if it did drop to zero, there would be a counterbalance of that, and there would be people stepping in to borrow free stablecoins, right? So they should be stepping in to borrow free CRV USD. Again, there's a timing-ish component there. Does it happen? How long does that last? Do we see like a seesaw effect where, there's periods of time when it's, in the single digits and then it flies up to 5 or 6%? Or, does it stay sustained at a very, very low rate because they're over looping? It's possible. I don't think it's responsible. I think that's probably it would seem unlikely for it to happen on a very consistent basis, at least. Again, that's remains to be seen. But that is a consideration, and it is something that that has been discussed, has been talked about.
But the most catastrophic condition that would be grounds for liquidation is if the underlying lending market were to become insolvent, all of the suppliers exit the market. So there's no way for the user who's borrowed from Resupply to be able to unwind their position, and foreseeably there's no way to correct this market in order to allow them to unwind their position. So they've become more or less permanently trapped.
They're stuck
due to insolvency.
Yeah, exactly. And that would be the worst case scenario, and that would mean that a collateral has been added to the system that shouldn't have been added, or a good collateral like WBTC or whatever TBTC just went bad. And that is your risk in being in the insurance pool. It's like something really, really catastrophic like that with one of the collaterals happening. But as a standard practice with normal liquidations, unless you're doing super degenerative stuff with looping, excessive looping, and even then, like when you're looping that much, users should just be regularly topping up their collateral so that they don't hit that line. But again, we don't know how that's exactly going to play out. But you're right. The main concern is going to be bad collateral. And as long
and speaking of this, this is something that Curve probably should be addressing. And I know that it's an idea that's been floating around, that there should be some allocation of revenue generation that is redirected towards an insurance pool to deal with situations where its LlamaLend markets or potentially its mint markets suffer from bad debt that needs to be cleared.
You bring up a really good point. I hadn't really thought of that, but obviously they're certainly incentivized to not see anything like that happen. So directing fees to the insurance pool would only ensure the health of the market. So yeah, I mean, that's an interesting take. I hadn't even really considered that, but yeah, that's something that could be very, very helpful.
And I don't believe that it would be hard to implement such a thing, especially on the Curve USD mint markets. All of the revenue generation from Curve USD goes through a fee splitter contract,
right?
And that is currently directing the revenue towards to SCRV USD and to V Curve token holders.
Yeah.
But you could theoretically add an insurance fund onto that for these kinds of situations where markets accrue some bad debt that needs to be cleared.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I know you just came up with that on the fly, but that's actually a really cool idea. That's a really cool idea. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. That's, the major consideration is really, preventing some of these bad collaterals from getting on the system.
But just going back to Resupply in this situation where you have a catastrophic market failure, in this situation, it's my understanding is that in the beginning, this will be a governance action to determine that there's a market that's insolvent. We need to force liquidate from the insurance fund. And then that will direct the collateral to the insurance fund, users in the insurance fund. And they basically are, they have to pray that eventually that market becomes liquid again, which may or may not happen. So right now, this is a governance decision. at least in the beginning of the early stages of the protocol. But there's some ideas about this becoming a programmatic action that that Resupply will be able to check the solvency of its underlying market and have kind of a proof of solvency oracle determine whether a forced liquidation is necessary, and to programmatically make that action happen.
Yeah. From what I understand, that's correct. Initially, it is going to be done and handled by via governance, but I know that there's talk about potentially doing that algorithmically, which would be amazing. So you don't have to worry about governance handling that. But yeah, that's how it's set as of right now.
Cool. So there's one thing I want to shill before the end of the day. It's another item that that LlamaRisk has been working on.
Oh,
it's
a little bit of alpha.
Yeah, a little bit of alpha because it's not publicly released yet, but I'm hoping this dashboard is going to be live by the end of this week. So yeah, I have it up on my screen. This is a alpha preview of the upcoming CurveUSD market health scoring. So right now, what you can see here are the CurveUSD mint markets, and we are applying a score to each market that you can see over here, the overall score. If you select the individual market, there's a variety of categories that we review, such as bad debt, and you can see how the score is changing over time. You can also get some metrics related to the bad debt and the percent of bad debt to total debt in the market. And then each of these categories you can look at. I'm particularly fond of the debt ceiling metric, which we have a methodology which we've published on our website that we determine a recommended debt ceiling for each collateral based on its global liquidity, based on the borrower distribution in this particular market, and we determine from that how profitable liquidations would be of a certain exposure level to that collateral, and we determine from that what should be the debt ceiling to limit the exposure to a certain size. And you can see how this recommended value changes over time.
This is very symbiotic with even Resupply. I can see, borrowers would want to come and check out the health of a market before, choosing the market that they want to participate in.
Right. Yeah. So we've been working on this project for a number of months now, and I hadn't considered its usefulness for Resupply until I was doing my due diligence on the protocol the past couple of days.
No, this is amazing.
And I realized, there's Resupply has a need to review the properties of the markets that it's choosing to onboard. And I thought, hey, we were planning on having this dashboard available just for users who use the LlamaLend market, but actually for integrating protocols like Resupply that are choosing to have exposure to some markets and not others potentially. These kinds of market health scoring frameworks with metrics attached to them, I think could be useful for stakeholders to get insight about the relative risks associated with specific LlamaLend markets.
Absolutely. 100%. This is totally. I can totally see this being used, especially when people are trying to decide, which markets to get into. 100%. Excellent. Amazing work.
All right. Yeah. So that's all I wanted to share with that one. We can go ahead and take that off the screen now. So CryptoVestor, those were the main things I can think of that I really wanted to go over with Resupply. I'm not sure if we missed anything that you think is important, then we should definitely talk about it though.
I think we touched pretty much on all of the main key points. Obviously, I think I mentioned in the beginning, I think that Resupply is going to have a profound effect on the whole Curve ecosystem. I think it's going to, it will obviously increase the supply of CRV USD. I think that, it obviously has knockoff effects throughout the whole ecosystem. And we're really excited. We're looking forward to it. I know I want to participate in the protocol as well. And it just looks like, it looks like the future is really bright for LlamaLend, for FraxLend, and for Resupply. And it should be launching here pretty soon. I know that the contracts are already done. The second audit is already completed. So we're talking about a matter of weeks, I would expect. And it's going to be exciting to see the impact it's going to have. I think you understand better than most, the type of mechanism at play that and how it can affect the supply and the fees to curve, and what that ultimately means to the fees for curve ecosystem. So it's exciting. I think we're going to see it here shortly, and it's going to be very, very impactful.
Yeah, and I too, I'm really looking forward to the deployment, and it sounds like from everything you've said, and we know the audits, a couple of audits have just been completed, that it seems the protocol deployment is just around the corner now.
Yep.
And for our part at LlamaRisk, we're doing everything that we can to prepare for that and make sure that the underlying markets that Resupply wants to use are configured in the best possible way to protect the users and to encourage more confidence in users coming and using Resupply. Mm-hmm. And I'll just to go back to what I said in the very beginning, the people working on this protocol, this sub-DAO, as it's being called for Convex and Yearn, these are real heavyweights in our ecosystem who are working on this protocol, some of the best. Yep. And so just because of who I know who's involved in this protocol development, I'm really personally bullish on that it's going places. So really looking forward to see what happens here.
Yeah. Again, I'll say it again. I think that Resupply is like a turbocharger for the whole curve ecosystem, and I think it's going to be pretty shocking to people when they see what it's capable of doing.
All right. Well, CryptoVestor, I guess we're the two laggards who made it all the way to the end.
We did. We had a pretty good turnout, right? I think we